Whiskey is a liquor made from fermented grain mash. Different varieties use various grains like barley, corn, rye, and wheat, which may be malted. It's usually aged in wooden casks, often made of charred white oak, but sometimes uncharred casks previously used for aging port, rum, or sherry are used. Whiskey is regulated worldwide, with many classes and types. What unites them all are the fermentation of grains, distillation, and aging in wooden barrels. Distillation might have been practiced by the Babylonians in Mesopotamia in the 2nd millennium BC for perfumes and aromatics, but this is debated and uncertain. The first confirmed chemical distillations were done by the Greeks in Alexandria in the 1st century AD, though these were not for alcohol. The medieval Arabs adopted the Alexandrian Greeks' distillation methods, with Arabic records beginning in the 9th century, but again not for alcohol. This technology then spread to medieval Latins, with the earliest Latin records appearing in the early 12th century. The first records of alcohol distillation are from 13th century Italy, where alcohol was distilled from wine. The practice spread through medieval monasteries, mainly for medicinal purposes, like treating colic and smallpox. Distillation spread to Ireland and Scotland by the 15th century, where it was commonly distilled for medicinal purposes. Initially practiced in monastic settings, distillation later moved to the secular realm through medical practitioners in the Guild of Barber Surgeons. The first mention of whiskey in Ireland appears in the Annals of Clonmacnoise, noting a chieftain's death in 1405 from consuming too much aqua vitae during Christmas. In Scotland, the earliest record of whiskey production is from the Exchequer Rolls of 1495, where malt was sent to Friar John Core to make aqua vitae, enough for about 500 bottles. James IV of Scotland, who reigned from 1488 to 1513, was known to enjoy Scotch whiskey. In 1506, Dundee bought a significant amount of whiskey from the Guild of Barber Surgeons, which had a monopoly on production. In its early days, whiskey was not aged and had a raw, harsh taste compared to modern versions. Renaissance-era whiskey was also very potent and undiluted. Over time, whiskey evolved into a much smoother drink. In the early 1600s, as European settlers, including the Irish and Scots, moved to the Americas, they brought their whiskey distillation knowledge with them. During this period, the first licensed whiskey distillery appeared. In 1608, the Old Bushmills Distillery in Northern Ireland became the world's first official whiskey distillery. Meanwhile, whiskey was becoming increasingly popular in the American colonies. Its production and consumption grew rapidly, and during the American Revolution, whiskey was so valued that many distillers used it as currency. Even George Washington was a distiller, producing up to 300,000 barrels of rye whiskey annually at his Mount Vernon plantation. After the Revolutionary War, whiskey continued to be significant in American history and politics. To help pay off war debts, the new American government imposed a whiskey tax. This tax angered many, especially farmers who relied on distilling their unused grains. This unrest led to the Whiskey Rebellion in the late 18th century, where 600 armed men attacked a tax inspector's home to stop tax collection. President George Washington responded by sending a militia of 13,000 to suppress the rebellion in Pennsylvania. Though the rebellion was quashed, the whiskey tax remained a major burden for farmers. This discontent was pivotal in the election of Thomas Jefferson, who repealed the tax shortly after becoming president. It might be surprising, but until 1823, distilling whiskey in Scotland and Ireland was illegal. This led to much of the production happening at night to avoid detection, coining the term moonshine. From 1920 to 1933, the United States enacted prohibition, making the production, sale, and use of alcohol illegal. This devastated the U.S. whiskey market, but there was one notable exception. The government allowed doctor-prescribed medicinal whiskey, which could only be obtained from pharmacies. This exception significantly contributed to the growth of the Walgreens pharmacy chain, which expanded from 20 to 400 stores during these 13 years. Beer is one of the world's oldest alcoholic beverages, the most widely consumed and the third most popular drink after water and tea. It's made by brewing and fermenting starches from cereal grains, usually malted barley, though wheat, corn, rice, and oats can also be used. The fermentation process converts the starch sugars in the wort into ethanol and carbonation. Most modern beer is brewed with hops, which add bitterness, flavor, and act as natural preservatives and stabilizers. Other flavoring agents, such as gruit, herbs, or fruits, can also be used instead of hops. In commercial brewing, natural carbonation is often replaced with forced carbonation. Beer and whiskey are made from the same basic ingredients: barley or other grains, water, and yeast. Despite their vastly different tastes, they share this common foundation. However, there are key differences between them. Beer contains hops and is not distilled, whereas whiskey lacks hops and undergoes distillation. Additionally, beer is carbonated, while whiskey is not. Beer is one of the world's oldest prepared alcoholic drinks. The earliest evidence of fermentation comes from 13,000-year-old residues of a beer-like gruel used by the semi-nomadic Natufians for ritual feasting at Raqefet Cave in Israel's Carmel Mountains. Evidence suggests beer was also produced at Göbekli Tepe during the pre-pottery Neolithic period, around 8500 to 5500 BC. The earliest clear chemical proof of barley beer dates back to around 3500 to 3100 BC from Göbekli Tepe in the Zagros Mountains of western Iran. Some believe it could date back even further, to around 10,000 BC when cereal farming began. Beer is prominent in the written history of ancient Egypt, and some archaeologists think it played a crucial role in the formation of civilizations. About 5,000 years ago, workers in Uruk, modern-day Iraq, were paid in beer. During the construction of the Great Pyramids in Giza, each worker received a daily ration of 4 to 5 liters of beer, which provided both nutrition and refreshment, essential for their labor. Early Sumerian writings include references to beer, such as the Hymn to Ninkasi, a prayer to the goddess of brewing, which also served as a way to remember the beer recipe in a largely illiterate society. The Epic of Gilgamesh features the Alewife Duri advising Gilgamesh to enjoy life with beer. The Ebla tablets from 2500 BC discovered in Syria confirm beer production in the city of Ebla. In China around 7000 BC, a fermented drink made from rice and fruit was produced, unlike sake, which uses mold to saccharify the rice. Instead, the rice was likely prepared by chewing or malting. During the Vedic period in ancient India, records show the consumption of a beer-like drink called sura. Greek historian Xenophon noted beer production in Armenia during his travels. Beer brewing made its way from Egypt to Greece, as evidenced by the Greek word for beer, zythos, derived from the Egyptian zytum. However, beer did not gain the same popularity in Greece as it had in Egypt. The Greeks preferred strong wine and viewed beer as a low-class drink consumed by barbarians. The sentiment was similar in Rome, where wine was also favored over beer. The Greek general and writer Xenophon, in Book 4 of his Anabasis, described beer made from barley in great bowls, with barley malt floating on top. Drinkers used reeds to suck the beverage, which, without water, was very strong and had a flavor that needed to be acquired. Xenophon clearly did not enjoy beer, and neither did many of his fellow Greeks. The playwright Sophocles also referred to beer unfavorably, suggesting moderation in its use. The Romans held a similar disdain for beer. The historian Tacitus described the Germans' beer as a horrible brew fermented from barley or wheat, which was a poor substitute for wine. Emperor Julian wrote a poem praising the scent of wine as nectar and disparaging the smell of beer as resembling that of a goat. Despite this disdain, beer was brewed in Rome. Evidence from the tomb of a beer brewer and merchant in Treveris, modern-day Trier, shows that beer was indeed produced. Excavations at the Roman military camp Castra Regina, modern-day Regensburg, on the Danube, have uncovered significant beer brewing activity shortly after the camp was established in 179 CE by Marcus Aurelius. Although beer was not as popular as wine among the Celts, this attitude was reinforced by the Romans. Celtic tribes paid substantial sums for wine from Italian merchants, and the Gauls were particularly known for their love of Italian wines. Nonetheless, beer brewing continued to develop. Almost any substance containing sugar can naturally undergo alcoholic fermentation, making it useful for brewing beer. Observing that sweet liquid could be extracted from starchy sources, many cultures likely invented beer independently. The advent of bread and beer increased prosperity, allowing time for technological development and contributing to the rise of civilizations. Beer was spread across Europe by Germanic and Celtic tribes as early as 3000 BC and was primarily brewed domestically. The early European beers, which differed significantly from modern beer, might not be recognizable today. Besides the basic starch source, these early beers often included fruits, honey, various plants, spices, and even narcotic herbs. Notably absent were hops, which were only introduced later. The first mention of hops in Europe was around 822 by a Carolingian abbot and again in 1067 by Abbess Hildegard of Bingen. In 1516, William IV, Duke of Bavaria, adopted the purity law, which is possibly the oldest food quality regulation still in use today. This law dictated that the only ingredients allowed in beer were water, hops, and barley malt. Before the Industrial Revolution, beer was primarily made and sold domestically. However, by the 7th century AD, European monasteries also began producing and selling beer. During the Industrial Revolution, beer production shifted from artisanal to industrial manufacture, rendering domestic production insignificant by the end of the 19th century. The development of hydrometers and thermometers revolutionized brewing by providing brewers with greater control over the brewing process and a better understanding of the results.